Hello everyone and welcome along to your Sunday night edition of the TII podcast. My name is Craig Dennett and I'm your host this evening as I'm joined by Tommy McIntyre and Kyle McLean. I was joined by Tommy McIntyre. He has since disappeared. Hopefully he'll make a reappearance. I'm joined by Kyle McLean to look back over what is extremely disappointing, I think is the understatement of the century, but extremely disappointing weekend for Rangers. You can probably see that from Kyle's face as he sits there just now. But we'll just dig into some of the bigger topics around the game yesterday, around what's going to happen moving forward, all of that sort of stuff. Please leave your comments in the comment section. We'll try and bring up as many as we can. I know there's a lot of passion out there, there's a lot of upset, a lot of disappointment. We can make this a cathartic podcast and just hopefully make sure that everyone feels ever so slightly better by the end of this upcoming hour. But Kyle, we're 24 hours on. What are your sort of reflections on yesterday?
Just another one of those days. That's just what it felt like, wasn't it? I know you and I chatted after it and just very dejected. I mean, even the mood before it, we were just... It was crazy for an Old Firm game, there was no, banter or just hope about it. And the game just lived up to that expectation from a Rangers point of view, to be honest with you. It was just the same old that we've seen time and time again the past 2 years with the same players. I'm sure we'll get into it, one in particular, but yeah, just feeling it's an opportunity missed for as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, how about you, Craig? Are you feeling any better after it?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But I think it's one that we saw was coming. We knew was coming. We spoke in the build up to the game yesterday around how confident do we feel? Do we have, how much hope do we actually have that we're going to be able to get a win at Celtic Park? And even when we were all walking up to the Kilmarnock game on Sunday, it didn't feel like anyone at Ibrox was believing that we were going to be able to get a result at Celtic Park to then be able to push on that title challenge and take it all the way. It didn't feel that there was that confidence or even hope amongst the fans. It was almost like that had left already. And I think yesterday, the way it panned out in terms of the own goal, the red card, all of that sort of stuff, you didn't even have the chance to hope for 90 minutes. You just after at half time, it was almost like, well, we know what's going to happen here. But yeah, it's really disappointing from the position that we got ourselves in to then be in this space again. Tommy, you've managed to join us again. Thankfully, Kyle's just given his views on what his reflections were 24 hours on. How are you feeling?
Well, I think I've set the scene there by not wanting to be part of the conversation, but you've dragged me back into the pod. No, listen, exactly that. I mean, there's a lot of frustration with the dynamics of the club, a lot of frustration with the players in particular, and we should definitely focus on them. I'm not entirely sure about some of the questions being asked of Philippe Clement by some sections, but yeah, and I think it does come back to that point that you're making, and Kyle might have been making it as well before I rejoined, which is we'd put ourselves in a really strong position. So the whole point about, but if you look back the way where we were at the start of the season, kind of drops away because you put yourself back in the position. And then Celtic just did what they had to because we'd handed the initiative back. So it all comes back to me, and all the frustration comes back to Ross County, to Dundee, and that's it. And that's essentially what's driving people a little bit. Their frustration is probably the polite way to put it on a podcast.
I get that. I think Ross County and Dundee was when I think we all knew that it'd gone, it'd been lost, and that was the time. I think on reflection, to blame it on those two results is maybe quite harsh, and that I might be on my own on that one. I think when you look back at how we started the season, the number of points we dropped in that period, wasn't Aberdeen at home, dropping points here, there and everywhere. I think there's so many spots over the season before Philippe Clement even came into the club that you could look at. Tommy's shaking his head because he says, well, you got yourself back into that position. Go on, take control of it from there. I think there's so many a season is a marathon, not a sprint, and it's impact. Whatever happens early in the season is still an impact, no matter what. But Tommy, I'll let you come back in on that.
No, listen, I get where you're coming from, right? All those points that were dropped make a difference at the end, right? I'm not disagreeing with that point. But if I stick with your analogy, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Well, come the turn in the last mile marker in that marathon, we'd put ourselves in front of the pack, right? Or at least had it completely in our destiny. And then tripped on a crisp packet that was, blown across the track or whatever. So whilst I get your point, materially, didn't matter. We put ourselves back at the front of the race, and then Ross County and Dundee. When it really mattered, we talk about big players, big moments, key things. We'd got ourselves there, played particularly poorly in the Old Firm, managed to get a last-minute equaliser. Came out, the points gap hadn't closed on Celtic's behalf, right? So we were still in a really strong position, right into the split. First 2 games of the split, you're looking at those 6 points with no, offence given to Ross County and Dundee, but you're looking at them and you're thinking, go out and make a really strong statement into the split, take 6 points. You drop 5. The cushion that you'd built up erodes completely, the initiative's handed back, the momentum's handed back, and then, you just start to implode slightly. So, yeah, whilst I absolutely get where you're coming from a numbers perspective, the damage had been repaired, and then we managed to damage ourselves again. And then Celtic have, quite rightly put themselves in the position of probably winning the title. I would fully expect them to. So, yeah, that's why I disagree, because you cannot let the players away with the fact that they've got themselves into a place and then let themselves down.
I think that's fair. I think there are discussion points, I guess, and we'll go on to talk about actually when you look at the team that was on the park yesterday, when you look at the subs that came on, vast majority are squad players. They're not starting 11 lineup players. I think you've got 5 or 6, if not more than that, in the starting lineup that wouldn't be in the first 11 was everyone fit. You've then got that then has an impact on who comes off the bench, and the people coming off the bench are actually further down the pecking order than the ones that are on the park. So then you're further weakening the team that's there, I guess, and it doesn't help when you get a stupid red card as well. But we'll go on to all of that. Kyle, back to yesterday's game, I guess. Where do you think it all went wrong?
Nice, easy question for me, Craig. But I suppose it depends. Where do you start from? Do you start from all the injuries that we've had, as you've just alluded to, making the team selection? There was really only one choice of team selection for Clermont yesterday, in terms of what was going on. But I think the big 2 words will be John Lundstrom. For me, I never like, picking out individual players and highlighting their incompetencies in a game like this, but just it was so disappointing for a player that we've all heard come out and identify multiple times as in that leadership group. It's Tav, it's Goldson, it's Linney, and just for him to, let's face it, lose his head in a game like that was just really, really poor from a professional footballer, no matter what level you're playing at. I think it was pretty evident from the start that he was just not at it. I just felt he was moseying about, and that was just kind of set the tone for others in that team. I know what was the word that was used in the... I never seen the ball watching used so many times in the TII WhatsApp group yesterday, because that was all I seen when it was going off. And then obviously you've touched on it as well, like the mentality of some of these players. It's in their heads, I think, that they just can't overcome it. I don't know if they've worked with psychologists and whatever you had behind the scenes, but there's just a core group in that, players that just, whatever it is that you need to go on and win titles and championships, don't have it.
Yeah, Tommy, John Lundstrom was one of the main talking points in the week builder up to the game. I think a lot of Rangers fans had said he's not really performed in the big games for us this season, even last season. We needed more steel in there. A lot of people were hoping, I think, or almost expecting Dujon Sterling to be put into that central midfield position. I think he wasn't. I said in the post-match yesterday, I think he wasn't put into that central midfield position because Falkirk needed someone outright. I think that he thought they would potentially give James Tavernier a wee bit of protection against Dyes and Maida, and it's probably why Dujon Stelling was put out there. But even leading into yesterday's game, before the horror show that he did have on the pitch, John Lundstrom was a real question mark for a lot of Rangers fans. Were you? Was it one that you expected him to play anyway, or would you have liked him to play? Would you have liked someone else to be in there?
I think he was always going to play. I mean, Philippe Clement does like him. I think I've said that before. He sees him as a good player and doing a job in there. Should he still be at Ibrox next season? We'll come to that probably. He's not been particularly or consistently good across his Rangers career anyway, and definitely subject to drop off of form for lengthy periods. But I always thought he was going to come in primarily because we've had, and it's not an excuse, but there has been a rash of injuries which has upset the balance of the team in key moments and drop-offs of form. So you would think, right, a Nico Raskin could have went in there, but he's not been near it. Ryan Jack, but we know that there's a kind of breakdown physically there, and he's not been at it either. Because the balance of a kind of Raskin, Lundstrom, Sterling, Diomande, if we were playing 4 across there, is actually pretty decent. I think they can do a job. So yeah, I think it was horses for courses in that. He wasn't going to drop him. I think you're right about the Sterling piece about needing somebody outright, so you lose that energy that you can have in the midfield as well. And he has a terrible, terrible game, and he's not added anything to the weight of, right, I deserve a new contract, so to speak. And I think a lot of people had an absolute belly full of, the way he went about it, and it is a silly one, and it's not his first Old Firm, so it's not as if, right, that first one, it's got to him, or something like that, which you see sometimes. He's been over the course. He knows what it's like to go to Celtic Park. So yeah, he's done himself no favours in the eyes of the support, and it'd be interesting to see if he actually is offered that contract extension.
Yeah. Craig, I'll see if I can just step in there. I think this goes back to something that we touched on in the Wednesday podcast that I was hosting, and it was a question I left towards the end, and it was, for the guys that were on it, it was, what should we do? Should Rangers go out and play their own game? Should we play players in their best positions and to their strengths? Or should we set up to nullify Celtic? And that was the way that I was leaning towards that. You touched on it with Dujon Sterling in that midfield. I felt he was a perfect foil for McGregor in terms of his running, his output. If you just tell Dujon Sterling to mark and stay on him, because it's the midfield, that's where these games are won and lost every time. And I'm not saying it's naivety from the manager, but I just think there was a bit of, we should have focused a bit more on stopping their main threats. I take the point about Sterling being supporting Tav. Again, I know that was something after the game that we talked about. Was there even a discussion in there to put Sterling at right back and have Tav one forward if he was worried about the Maeda running down that wing? But it never. I don't know what does that say about your captain, but I just think we need to be a bit more like that going forward, certainly into next season, is focusing on nullifying Celtic's threats.
Yeah, you've spoken a bit there about some stuff that's coming in the comments. It's something that a lot of people have spoken about today as well, or post the game. Under Steven Gerrard for 2 years, felt like we had Celtic's number for quite a long period of time there. I'd say probably 18 months to 2 years we had Celtic's number. For the last 2 years, under both Postecoglou and Rodgers, they've had us over a barrel, effectively. It feels like they could just turn up to Old Firm games and do whatever they wanted. They turned up, was it the start of this season, we turned up with 3 of their first choice defenders out injured and still came away with a victory. They've turned up with weaker teams, turned up where we've thought, right, we need to go run over the top of them, and they've still found a way to win. And that's where we need to look at ourselves and go, right, how are we approaching this? A lot of Rangers fans will expect us, we just go, and no matter who we're playing, we go play our own game. We keep the same formation, we keep the same players, we go play our own game, and we go toe to toe with anyone, and that's how it'll be. The question you asked at the end of the Wednesday pod, Kyle, I'm full agreement with. I think very much we should be approaching games like this, and if we have to make tweaks to formations, if we have to make tweaks to personnel on the pitch, to try and combat some of the strengths that Celtic have, then we should be doing it. We shouldn't just be ignoring them and going, well, let's go do our own thing and then hope that it works, because it's shown that it's not been working the last 2 years, but especially in the last 3 games under Philippe Clement. I don't think he's had a positive Old Firm game at all. Even the 3-3 draw, I don't think you could say was a positive from Philippe Clement, particularly with that first half performance. And it's a real. The worry for me is that it's such an obvious thing. It's so obvious that in Old Firm games, the midfield battle is where it's won and lost. Some of the comments in here, Hugo Bear kind of touched on it a wee bit, saying formation and team selection was all wrong. RFC 72 says we needed legs in the midfield and probably a midfield 3 to win the midfield battle. Every time we've played with a 10, we've been overrun versus them. And that was part of the sort of discussion that was taking place pre-match as well, was actually whether you choose Cantwell or Lawrence, neither of them are going to do what we need them to do in that midfield 3 to help us win that battle. And I think that's why people said, well, if we get a midfield 3, whether it's Sterling, Diomande and Raskin or something of that variation, then at least you've got that steal, and then you're relying on the front 3 to bring you into the game from an attacking perspective. But I very much think we need to approach these games in need to be sensible in terms of what Celtic strengths are, need to understand how we combat those and also exploit weaknesses like
I think as well, you're absolutely right in terms of the midfield, and we know that that's been a problem, particularly the last couple of Old Firm games. And I certainly don't think that the manager or the management team turn up and go, let's not think about nullifying Celtic strengths, right? And it might be a really unpalatable thing to say, but I don't buy into this Celtic are a terrible team stuff, right? Celtic are a decent side and they know how to win, and they've consistently done it, right? And they've come good at the right moment, and that's what's happened, right? It's unfortunate, it's not great, but there you are. Our squad en masse, because it's been several different managers now, if you take that Stevie G part out of the equation, have consistently come up against mental roadblocks or the psychology of it or whatever, and not being able to go over the line in these big games, right? Now, you can put that down to, okay, it's either the mentality of it, it's luck, it's Celtic being better, it's our players being inferior, whatever you want to take on, or a combination of all those things. But ultimately, we can't keep going back to it, and it looks like we're facing into it again, right? I'm not up for the manager kind of discussion. I think he's done a good job coming in, and he'll get a chance to bring his own players. But if you take the wider position, we're now in a place whereby lots of players running towards the end of contracts over this and next year. Not a huge amount and vast amounts of money. We are probably going to lose out unless something dramatic happens on that guaranteed Champions League spot. That will go to Celtic further in their coffers as well. And we're going to have to go through another refresh of the squad. So that's not necessarily negative, right? As long as you can get the right players at the right price point or whatever. It's just who exits. Because you're talking about consistent core group of players who haven't been able to drag themselves over the line with things. And the one, like I said, the one that keeps coming back to it is you put yourself in a great position, but then when the heat get turned up and you were top and you could really motor on, you fell apart at Ross County and Dundee.
How, Tommy, you've said, and you've kind of highlighted there that the players you feel is where the blame lies. Is that, my next question was going to be how much is on the players' shoulders and how much lies with the manager? What are your views on that one, Tommy?
I don't think that's a question anyone needs an answer to after that, but I'll give you, yeah, I mean, listen, managers are always up for questioning, and you could say, has he made some selection mistakes? Yeah. Has he had a positive or been able to get a positive Old Firm game out of this squad? No, he hasn't. But again, you look at the wider piece with Philippe Clement in that he did gets back into that race and then it's fallen apart. He has won a trophy, he's in a final for another one. Could still walk away with a cup double, right? Which I think is a positive season actually, and had a kind of decent crack in Europe as well, type of thing. It comes back to the players for me. It definitely does. I mean, even if you just take the last two Old Firms, right, with that, here's a chance to go and make a bigger statement at Ibrox in the Old Firm, and then there's nothing the manager can do about that 45 in the first half, right? That's empty jerseys all round, and then they drag themselves back in, and then falling apart, and then come back round to, right, go and make a statement, get yourself back into it, and put down a marker for the cup final. There you go, with individual player errors as well, and your John Lundstrom moments. So yeah, it absolutely comes down to the players. It has to. I mean, managers are right and properly questioned, but I am a big believer on, you step over the white line, all you need to do is face up to your man, beat your man, work really hard, show the fans that's what you're doing. Too many don't seem to have that ability or that mental strength or whatever it takes. And so, yeah, I lay it firmly at the door of the players.
Kyle, before I come on to get your thoughts, Stuzo666 says Clement has to go. If he doesn't win the next 2 Celtic games, he's rightly toast. I'm done with him. Where do you feel the blame lies between the players and Philippe Clement? And were you surprised yesterday by the number of people, particularly on social media, who were calling for Philippe Clement to be sacked after that game?
So I'll answer the second part of that question first. In terms of the amount of people clamouring to get Philippe Clement sacked, absolutely not. That's just standard reaction from our support base if you lose an Old Firm game. So that it's clear, I'm still firmly behind Philippe Clement. I do think he needs to win an Old Firm because it was the type of thing that was aimed at Beale. Well, I'm sure what the cup is a way in the future at the moment, but yeah, it's just, well, there you go. In my head, I'm trying to put it as far away as possible, Craig, all right? But like, yeah, as Tommy said, it's always the manager that gets the blame for these things. Where does the blame lie for yesterday's defeat? The medical team could be where you could point the fingers at from it if you're looking at it from a slightly different angle. The amount of players that we have out. I know, listen.
That's a rogue shout. I mean, where's that coming from?
There you go. I don't know.
I want to see where you're going with this, Kyle. I want to see where you're going with this.
I've not prepped for this in any way, shape, or form, but it's just I'm not saying it's firmly at their door, but I think a team that's got a Cortez and a Seaman is a totally different thing, and the injuries not being managed quite correctly. Well, that's a question that we've been asking for the last 2 years, I think. But in terms of team selection, I would challenge anybody. If you asked anybody, what team do you think Philippe Clement will pick? I don't think, other than Lawrence for Cantwell, I don't see. That was pretty much the team I think all of us predicted what would start. Hindsight's a wonderful thing in terms of, Raskin played well for the last sort of 20 or however long he was on that pitch. I felt he did make a difference, looked a bit more direct than John Lundstrom, but for me, it's just the mentality again. It's just a shoddy mentality from our players that just couldn't stand up to what they faced yesterday at Parkhead.
So I need to double check. Are you saying there, Kyle, that you think that the treatment of Cortez's injury and stuff like that hasn't been handled correctly?
No, I'm just saying, not Cortez in particular. I mean, if you look at the injury list that we have, like Ridvan should have been starting yesterday. We were told 5-6 weeks ago that Ridvan would be back in a week. Why has he not been back in a week? Why have we only seen him play for 2.5 hours? I mean, because the medical team, that information is coming from Clement's, and to my knowledge, in any of the press conferences that we've not had any update that there's been a new injury or anything like that. So Ridvan is the example that I can think of off the top of my head at the minute. Seema as well was another one. I'm fairly certain we were told that he was going to be back pretty sharpish. I know he picked up that other injury, but he's nowhere to be seen round about this time as well. I'm not for a second saying that they've not managed Cortez's injury, because that was a freak injury akin to what Jamie Murphy suffered on the rugby park pitch where he twisted his knee. Once your knee's done, there's not an awful lot you can do about it. But I think in terms of the medical team this summer, huge questions will have to be asked of what we are doing with the players. That's all.
I think Philippe Clement will ask those questions.
He doesn't look convinced, Tommy.
He's been asking those questions since he first came in. He said that our record and our squad availability is night and day compared to where it should be, and night and day compared to other clubs he's worked at. Other clubs he's worked at, he said that the squad availability should be averaging about 90%. Throughout the full season, the squad availability should be 90%. We were something like 67% of our squad was available for large parts of this season, and that shows massive deficiencies. But it's something that we've been talking about as fans for a number of years now. It's not a new thing to us. We come to expect it. We've perhaps normalised it a little bit in our heads, but it's not normal that this number of of important players, especially they're from the first team, are missing for long periods of time, and it's whether it's the medical department, whether it's the club's approach to that sort of thing, whether it's the consultants they have. I've no idea. We don't know a great deal about that side of things, but there needs to be huge changes in terms of output from that side of things, because how often do we hear one person's injured and then they get one or two additional injuries during the recovery? I mean, I know that sometimes people say, well, if one part of the body's injured, you put strain on another part, but it's still not consistent with other teams and other squads and their output as well. But I think there's massive questions to be asked. I'm not sure the blame lies with them. I think it lies massively with the players, but there are massive questions how we manage players, even though you see players like Kamar Roof that just consistently crumble. It's like a player shouldn't be like that. Tommy, you look like you're trying to jump in about 3 or 4 times there.
No, I was just listening. I was listening intently. I agree with that, right? And that clarity. And I think Philippe Clement, I think he referenced when he first came in the door that he was baffled by some of the pre-season that he'd heard about in terms of the fitness of the players as well. And as you get to certain points of the season, that lack of fitness can trigger injuries as well and breakdowns. Yeah, listen, I think there'll be an overhaul in that area in the pre-season anyway. I know that Philippe Clement and his team have tried to work through every part of the footballing department, so to speak, and there'll be money spent in there as well. Yeah, I mean, by and large, though, I mean, I don't think anybody's an amateur in there. And if players are breaking down or whatever, it's maybe the point Kyle makes is, should everybody be updated to every breakdown of a player and every new injury? Is that something that the club want to be talking about all the time? I'm not entirely convinced it is, actually.
Maybe not, but it makes you look silly if you're the manager of the football club and you say, this player's going to be back in a week, and then you don't see him for 5 weeks. That's where the angle I'm coming at. I get things change, but if you're going to make a statement like that, and especially to do with, the medical profession, you've got to be pretty confident that guy is going to be back playing in a week. So I think it's only fair that we should as fans be updated saying, yep, he's not going to be quite be out back for then.
Yeah, it's happened to Sima, it's happened to Ridvan, it's happened to Ryan Jack. It's happened a few times where it's been it'll be back in 2 or 3 weeks, and then still to see Ryan Jack. I know he played in the B team game for a certain period of time last week, but that can be further from where we need him to play. So yeah, it's happened a few times with those kind of players. But just moving that conversation on, Kyle, are there any concerns you have about Philippe Clement at this moment in time, or I know you said you're fully backing him still, but is there anything that sticks out that you go, oh, there's a wee question mark over that?
Yeah. Did we ever get clarity on if Suter was injured or not yesterday? Because I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sure people will let me know in the comments.
The club said he was, and the Sky Sports said he wasn't. So I don't know where that lies.
Yeah, but that.
The club are definitely sticking by that he was injured, and that's why he didn't make an appearance.
No, that's fair enough, because I was scratching my head at that substitution yesterday. But that's fine. If he's injured, that does make perfect sense. But yeah, as I said, it was just. This is going to sound like I'm bashing John Lundstrom this podcast when I'm really not trying to do that, because Craig, we've sat in the car many a time when I've been bigging up buzzing because John Lundstrom's been in the starting lineup, and I know you were not a fan of John Lundstrom when he joined the club, but again, a player like that who's been in a pretty bad run of form for the last few games, hasn't looked his normal direct self, playing in a position that I don't think suits him particularly well. It would have been a bold choice from the manager to drop him that game, but we've heard that Clement isn't afraid to make big decisions of that. It was pointed at his time in Monaco that he dropped, a couple of senior players in massive games for them, and they overcame it. Same with Bruges as well. The team selection was what it was yesterday, but maybe from a formation point of view, we could have done something different. I know somebody in the comments said that, could we have played, a solid 3 in the midfield rather than a 10? Yeah, I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to do. It was odd. Like, I don't want to say the players didn't look up for it yesterday, but I felt that everybody wasn't given 100% at every minute on that pitch. And I, you know, it might be levelled at me that it's unreasonable for anybody in any job to be expected to be given 100%. But at an Old Firm at Parkhead, when there's a league on the line, you've got to give it 100% in every moment.
I think
Just
for me,
you answered your own point there.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. Nobody can expect it all the time, right? People are human. But that big moment, you know what I mean? Bring it. That's your thing. That's really why you're in that blue jersey. It's the moments that matter, and you deserve to have another shocker. So yeah, just I like this version of the podcast where you ask a question, Kyle, and then you go around and answer it yourself. It's quite heartening to see. I can just sit here and listen to you.
It makes my job real easy, so it's fine. I think the disappointing thing for me was we didn't look like a team that was playing a must-win game. We didn't look like a team that was going to take the game by the scruff of the neck and just take full control of it and just get the goals that needed, get the result they needed, and go out of there and move on to the next game. It did not look like a team that was playing a must-win game. I think that's one of the most frustrating things for me. Tommy, I've seen it levelled that when Philippe Clement came in, we were 7 points behind. We're now 6 points behind. There's obviously been, for me, there's been a marked change when you look at the uptick in performance in the Europa League. You look at the League Cup win. You look at the run we went on when he first came in, all the way through to end of February, start of March. You look at how he maximised what he could get from this squad of players, which we all Rangers fans were out on. We all bought back in a little bit, and then we're back out again on them. But he showed that he can manage even a struggling squad to get them back into contention in a league that we all thought was done then. A lot of people are questioning if there have been improvements, though, given the fact that we've only gained 1 point in the league in effect. What are your thoughts?
There's a lot to unpack there, but it depends how you want to look at it, right? But I'll try and do the slightly terse version, I suppose. But I like Philippe Clement, so I don't think there's any question there that he's in the dugout next season, right? I do think he needs to win one of those Old Firms, and the cup final would be a perfect place to do it, right? Change the dynamics of how people would look at the end of the season and what's happened. He came in and he got that manager bounce, and he changed things, and he stabilised what was a team that was in free fall, right? And were pretty ropey. And as you say, he got the best out of them for a while. I would say, after a fact, or up to a point, the players have then returned to form, their form, which is dropped off, not winning the big moments. But he did manage to get them over the line and win a trophy as well. So that heartens me. And by and large, his picks of bringing people in with Niels Koppen have been decent. People like Diomande and stuff like that. I mean, the Silva experiment hasn't naturally worked, but again, it's a loan. Cortez looked good before the boys' unfortunate injury and stuff like that. So I think he gets a chance to do a clear out. And again, I come back to it. I think he's been good, and he's maximised what he could get out of this team. If he can drag them over the line and get us the cup double, it absolutely puts a gloss on the season as well. But he came into a situation that was pretty much on fire. He got the team to a place that we didn't think they could. He got them over the line with that first trophy as well. Yeah, injuries have hampered. Yeah, some of the decisions maybe you think, oh, how's that working out? It does look like we won't, win the title. That'll go across the city. He's got a chance to get that second trophy as well, and he performed well in Europe. All of that's positive. It's just the amount of turnover that then happens, and if Philippe Clement and Niels Koppen in the club can invest correctly and can get a turnover in players, and then what he does with people like who seem to have fallen out of form a little bit or fallen out of his view, Cantwell's, Raskins, does he want them there again? What do you do with some of the big core players like your Lundstroms, like your Tavs, like your Goldsons? Not everybody can go out the door because we're not in a place that we can absolutely refresh the entire squad. But who of the big players is going to go out? And that's going to then unlock what can come in. But it is another big important moment, and there's going to be a lot of faces coming in and out because there has to be. You cannot go back into battle next season with the majority of this squad.
Yeah, let's pick up on Todd Canwell, Kyle. That seemed a very strange one all round yesterday. I think in terms of the fact that, okay, he wasn't in the starting lineup, it's maybe a toss of the coin depending on approach between him and Lawrence as to who plays in that number 10 if we are playing a number 10. But I think every Rangers fan expected Todd Canwell to make an appearance probably about the 60-minute mark, to then see the substitutions that were made, Todd Canwell to be left on the bench again in a must-win game, one of our most creative players going forward, one of the players, one of our higher quality players as well in the squad, and yet he's left on the bench. What did you make of that? And is it a concern that maybe he's out of favour with the manager for whatever reason, whether it's on pitch or off pitch stuff?
Yeah, the Clement Cantwell relationship's been interesting watching it unfold, even since I know you and I were sat at that Aris Limassol game, Tommy, where he got hooked after about 20 minutes and there was the embrace after it, and then it was, oh, Todd wasn't doing, and we saw the back and forth and all that. So, I mean, pure speculation if there's anything going off at this point. I mean, I'll take Clement at his word, because I do think he is an honest guy and, you know, tries to, you know, give genuinely what he's thinking and feeling across to the fans and the supporters in the press conferences. But yeah, I was a bit perplexing, even when you've got not nothing to lose, but when you've got, I don't know if he just wanted two solid central midfielders in there and he just felt that we would be better, and that it was the 10 that was effectively going to be sacrificed, because if he was sort of, because he just had the Lawrence sort of dropping a bit deeper before he got substituted as well. But yeah, it was really strange. You're thinking, I'd love to know what the answer is to that question, why Clement didn't play him. You would think, you know, even in the last, if you got a couple of subs remaining, he would be one of the first names that you would chuck on there, purely because of his creativity, purely because you know he's going to wind them up a bit. Or maybe even was it that he was trying to protect them? I don't know, but I do agree that the whole decision for Todd Cantwell not even featuring in that game yesterday, when he can offer a goal, we saw it towards the tail end last season as well in the fixture at Ibrox. He scored a good goal in that game. So, yeah, no idea why he wasn't playing. And yeah, that one is on the manager for me.
Tommy, where do you think this leaves Todd Cantwell and Rangers? I think my expectations now are probably Todd Cantwell will be looking for a move this summer. The relationship doesn't seem to be a positive one there. Todd Cantwell has had moments, but he's not had a consistent run where you've been like, yes, there's the Todd Cantwell I saw when he played for Norwich. There's the Todd Cantwell I saw when he was rated as a £50 million potential signing for Tottenham, or was it Tottenham or Liverpool? Can't remember off the top of my head, but rated at a £50 million signing. I've just not seen that Todd Cantwell this season, and he's never looked entirely comfortable in Philippe Clement's system. Where do you think it leaves him after yesterday, especially?
Probably in the same place as a lot of players in the squad, which is having a good conversation with the manager and a conversation with the agent present, I would imagine, to see what the options are. And this comes back to, you know, does Philippe Clement see Todd Cantwell as that expressive player once he gets new people round about him? Or is it a case of, no, I'm giving you fair warning that I don't think you can come in and be as disciplined as I need you to be, and the creativity that you offer doesn't balance that out? So that'll be the question that Philippe Clement and his team will be looking at, and some of that will be dependent on, right, does Todd Cantwell want to fight for a jersey, or does he expect to be a starter? What does that look like in terms of Tom Lawrence as well? And it certainly looks like, certainly in the last few games, Clement prefers Lawrence to Cantwell. But also, who's going to come in round about that? And then does Philippe Clement want to change the style of play? Because I think very much we've set up in a way that matches the squad that he's inherited. And then when they tried to change that a little bit, and they kind of went a window, if you like, with the likes of Cortez and stuff like that, they ain't get a bad injury for Cortez, which changed the dynamic up top, so he couldn't bring in slightly different people. You've had Silva sitting out there. So yeah, I think Todd Cantwell will be questioning and looking for a conversation about, right, why can't I break into this team in these big games when a player like that is supposed to be influencing them? And then we'll see where we go. But again, like everybody else, depends if there's offers, depends who wants to come and, you know, look at our assets and stuff like that, and in terms of the playing staff. will drive some of that conversation as well.
Yeah, we've spoken about a lot of problems, a lot of issues, a lot of areas where we're like, we need to improve there. Kyle, I'm going to come to you first with this question, and there's lots of parts to it, so I'll ask you as well, tell me afterwards. But how do we fix it? How do we fix it short term, looking ahead to the Scottish Cup final in 2 weeks' time? How do we fix it so that we have a fighting chance to win that Scottish Cup final and lift the cup? I will say that I am much more confident in us going to Parkhead with 50-50 split of fans than I am of us going to Hampden, with 50-50 split of fans, not, and then rather than going to Parkhead.
Breaking exclusive news there of what the ticketing selection is going to be for the next Old Firm at Parkhead.
Yeah, so 50-50 split of fans at Hampden, I'm much more confident than a game like yesterday where 60,000 Celtic fans, no Rangers representation there at all. It's a much different game, much more different dynamic, all of that stuff. So how do we fix it short term, and then how do we fix it longer term and create a step change for next season?
In terms of short term, I've no idea. Again, God, this sounds terrible. I'd be having Raskin in there playing alongside Diomande based on his performance at the weekend. I don't even know if John Lodges will actually be eligible to play any of the games from now until the end of the season, depending on what he's red cards for. If it's for violent conduct, I think that's him out. I think that's a 3-game ban, including the Scottish Cup. Am I right in saying that?
I'm not sure if it casual to the Scottish Cup or not. Definitely out the rest of the games.
But yeah, that would be the sort of immediate thing. I don't know. Unless there's players coming back from injury, what else can the manager do? If it is the same lineup as before, I don't know. I'm hoping Ridvan Yilmaz might be back, might be fit, and I'll be certainly a lot happier about that left-hand side. What we do in terms of the wingers, I've no idea how far away Ravi Matondo is. He was a guy I would be having straight in that starting 11 as well, just based on his pace. But it is going to be so difficult to pick these players up off the floor again, because I know Clement was saying it's not mathematically over until it's done yesterday, but the league's done. It's finished, so they're just going to have to get on with it the next 2 games and just use these as games to, I don't know if we're going to try something new against Celtic. I see a lot of people in the comments about binning the number 10 position. Maybe that is something that we look at. Maybe we do look at a slight change in formation. Maybe we do look at what we've talked about as well and go on, and rather than playing purely to our strengths, look at a bit more at nullifying strengths in the opposition. Long term, Clement's got to have a window to bring in his own players. You look at the 3 players that he's brought in. Silva being a success? No, probably not. Not scored enough, not done enough. Diomande has been a big success for me. He's been really good. Felt like he was running about, like a dafty yesterday, clearly carrying out the manager's instructions in terms of breaking up the play, where that was, getting the fouls. And Cortez, he wanted wingers in, and you could sort of see what he was trying to do when we did have Cortez fit and fighting. So yeah, he's got to be given a window, got to get rid of the players. I'm sure him and Niels Coppin have been working on a plan for a wee while here, but I'm hoping they've been working on a plan, but that would be the long-term solution, is to regurgitate the squad and punt a lot of the deadwood out, quite frankly.
Same question over to you, Tommy, in terms of short-term fix, long-term fix.
Oh yeah, I'll wrap this up in 30 seconds. So I think Kyle's pretty much covered it. It's a pretty good synopsis in terms of, I think anything that can be done to strengthen the midfield for the game, whether that's bringing in a Raskin, whether that's finding a way to bring in Sterling in that midfield as well, whether Ryan Jack, I don't know, takes an injection of cortisone and comes back into play or whatever. Strengthening that midfield and the discipline round about it, and the physicality of it, and the ability to control the ball and control the space is really important. I think if Ridvan could come back, and I know we've had that conversation about when exactly is that going to happen, it would be good for the balance again, because you can take ball now. I think Ridvan Yilmaz is a better runner with the ball. So yeah, I think those are probably the changes. Does does Tom Lawrence come out and allow Canwell to go back in? Just looks at what that is. So again, he's working with a fairly limited kind of menu to select from there because of some of the injuries. It just depends. So I don't think we'll see wholesale changes or anything like that because there's nobody to wholesale change with, by and large. In terms of the longer fix, well, it is what it is, and it's a very trite comment, but it comes back to how much is going to be found cash-wise in the summer, who we can get short of, and then what kind of diamonds we're able to find. Because, I don't think there'll be huge, purchases. So there's going to have to be a mix of maybe frees and finding people to develop and all that type of good stuff that we talk about in the model. But there's got to be in some key areas some real uplift in the quality, right? And that's before you talk about players coming back, your Hadjis, your Sam Lammers, what do you do with them? So that's the long-term fix, is always the same answer, which is you need better players, right? It's just the nature of football and the nature of football clubs. The question specifically for us is, how do we find all that and fund it? And also we know that if we don't win this title, which increasingly looks like we won't, Celtic are about to bank another £30 million as well, which allows them to strengthen their hand, and I fully expect them to do it. So yeah, it's not an easy test for the board, but that's why they're there. That's why the investors are there. That's why people like Karim Varane are appointed to try and bring in new income streams as well. That's the long-term fix, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah, you've touched on kind of the points that I'm going to raise in kind of the final two questions there. Winning the league, I think it's actually effectively guarantees Celtic £60 million, not £30 million. So I think it's £60 million. We will get the enjoyment.
You're really upbeat there with only giving them 30 million that we don't have. So yeah, thanks for
that. I guess we will get the enjoyment of seeing them get pumped in 10 games rather than 6 in the new format. But that money gives them the chance to move on to a completely new level in this league. How do we see them receive that money and still be able to not just bridge the gap but catch up and surpass them on a domestic level? Tommy, sorry, that one's for you.
Yeah, I was doing my best to just ignore it for a second there. Well, listen, it's exactly as I described. The investors are going to have to be looked at in terms of funds coming in. You're hoping the scouting work that was changed in the background and Niels Coppin's contacts book and Philippe Clement's contacts book allow us to find some absolute diamonds. It doesn't always come down just to the checkbook. It's about the type of player you can go and then what you can enhance. Teams can be overhauled really quickly. We've seen that. And they can perform really well. I think our biggest problem is probably linked to two things, if you like. It's the size and scale of probably the refresh that's required. And then it's who's going to take some of these core players off of us. But I certainly think that you'll find some of the people that the support want away are still there next season. And then it's about, right, have you refreshed enough that you're not relying on them? They're not the core group. You've brought in a new impetus or whatever that looks like. Those are the kind of interlinked main drivers and the main challenges that the board are facing into. I mean, there will be money and they will go out and spend, but you're also looking to remove people from the squad as well, and that might be a bit more challenging.
Yeah, Kyle, Tommy spoke there about there will be players there that people are at the moment wanting to leave and wanting out the door. I fully expect James Tavernier to still be a Rangers player next year. I fully expect Conor Goldson to still be a Rangers player next year. Those are two players that always come in for high levels of criticism, particularly after games like that. Conor Goldson's obviously out injured now for the rest of the season. Do you think, as a support, Rangers fans will accept if those two players are still there, but potentially not guaranteed starters every week?
Yeah, you've taken the words right out of my mouth. I think that is the only scenario that the support will accept that, and it is mental that Dujon Sterling, is our best player in about 4 positions, and he's a right back. So I'm going to assume that his best position is going to be at right back. So I can fully see Sterling perhaps starting there. But yeah, Goldson is the other one for me. The very fact that we have seen some pretty serious links to the Panamanian Cordoba very much looks like he's going to be a rotation player next season. what else we'll do in those two positions, I don't know, but I can't see the support accepting anything else than certainly Conor Goldson being more of a squad player rather than that, because there's only so many seasons we can take of this. I know we've touched on it before, but it's just whatever it is, they have some sort of mental block that is preventing them from going on and taking it to the next level. And you've just got to, for me, you've just got to take that out of the team at the moment for next season. But we'll see what Clement does.
Yeah, we absolutely will. It's going to be a really interesting summer, and there'll be plenty of coverage and analysis and all that on the TII channel as we move through the summer. But Tommy, attention, it seems for the first time in a little while, is really turning towards the board, and it's really turning towards, right, what are you going to do to sort this? For the last 2 seasons, we've followed the exact same pattern. We've had a manager in place till September, October. We've sacked a manager. We've brought in a new manager. That manager's then had to utilise the squad that's in place. They've then been backed fully in the summer, only last for a couple of months, and then I repeat the cycle again. It's really important that we don't continue that. I think Clement needs to be given time to allow us to get out of that cycle and to build his own team. But as Rangers fans, we expect that to be done in one window, potentially 2. You might give him January as well, and that seems really unrealistic. But how does the board help us get out of that cycle?
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, Philippe Clement will be in the dugout next season, right? That's, unless something dramatic happens, but I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be in the dugout. To your point, it's going to the investors and looking at where the funds are and hoping. I'm going to duplicate what I said earlier on, hoping that we get players back. I think it's a prescient comment from Hugo Bear in the chat there in terms of people like Danilo. Do we capitalise and get a slightly reduced rate and go for Cortez? Who else is going to come in? Who do you move out? Where do you kind of let contracts go, whatever? But also what amount of money you can bring in from sales, right? And there's not many top tier assets in there. I think Jack Butland would probably be the standout one, and nobody would be really wanting to see Jack Butland leave the club at all. So the board are going to have to be funding this, so the investors are, and they're going to have to get creative with who they go out and find. Now, you're hoping a lot of due diligence has been done already on players, obviously, right, and scouted, whatever. But it's trying to get them in really quickly, trying to give Philippe Clement all the tools that a manager should be given, which is, we've backed you with cold hard cash, not loans. You've got a full pre-season under your belt. We've cleared that roadway for you. Now you need to go and see what you can deliver now that it's your team. And I think that's going to be the important point. Again, I come back to how many of the key players or the core squad, the senior leaders, are still there next season, or if they've been replaced by new untested ones in Rangers jerseys. That'll be big as well. But it comes back to the board having to find funds to go and get players in, because we cannot go through another manager reset, but we also need to get away from this constant squad overhaul that we found ourselves in, because it's not sustainable. And we just, instead of catching up, we seem to fall behind because the selection of talent that we brought in has not been optimal or not particularly worked. That's where we are. This has to be one of those final resets, and you need to give the manager time, whether it starts off positively or not, I think.
Yeah, Kyle, just I guess some of the comments are pointing towards the reason why Giovanni Van Bronckhorst was eventually sacked. The reason why Michael Beale was eventually sacked was because of that continued reliance on James Tavernier, Conor Goldson, John Lundstrom, Alfredo Morelos, Ryan Kent, effectively up until last summer. I guess it's something that, do you feel that if Clement continues to rely on those 3 players, John Lundstrom's contract's obviously up, I hope he doesn't get a new one. There's every chance he might, though. If he continues to rely on those 3 players, then that will ultimately lead to his downfall, same as it has the other managers.
Yes, it's hard to disagree with that, because it's the same things keep going wrong. We keep pointing to the same factors, and it being the 3 of them. I mean, it's difficult as a supporter to separate these 2 things, but I do think James Tavernier is a good football player, a fantastic football player. I'd even go as far to say that I think Conor Goldson's a pretty good football player as well, and I think John Lundstrom also is a good football player. But I said it's the mentality. I'm sure I might even reference it in Wednesday's pod, and it was a thing Ian Ferguson said when they were going for the 10 in a row from Rangers, and he was just said you would not believe what pressure does to a football player. You would not believe how, you start to think about it. He said it consumed them for like a year, and they focused on it so much. And I don't know if there's a bit about that with this three group. I know the same pish gets said every year, take the captaincy off Tav. I don't think that's the answer, is stripping the captaincy off him. I just think it's we need a new approach. We need... I saw the comment there, that's going to be a problem, having, squad players on 30, 40 grand a week. But something needs to change, and it is the only tangible thing that I can see that we can change at the moment, because we whether we like it or not, we have repeatedly failed with the same three at the core of the team.
Well, I mean, it comes back to the core thing. I think I've asked this before on the pod, right? So it's one for you, one for Craig, and it's for the listeners and watchers as well, which is, if you've got your budget for next season, right, whatever it is, and you look at it, do you see, given all the problems we've got across the squad, do you actually say, I definitely need to replace Tav, and I definitely need to replace Goldson? Are they top of your list, or are there other areas? And that's what the board and what the management team will need to face into. Can I get another season out of James Tavernier and rely on those goals and all that stuff, but also knowing what his flaws are at the back? Can I rely on Conor Goldson? Or do I absolutely need to spend the money right in there right now and not up front or another midfielder or whatever? Because I don't think we'll get everything that we want. That's always the core question.
I think, from my opinion, I think Kyle might be right in what he spoke about earlier in the podcast in terms of Dujon Sterling may become James Tavernier's competitor for that right back spot if Falkirk wants him there rather than the central midfield. I think Conor Goldson, our central defence needs strengthened anyway. So if you've got Cordoba that's been rumoured to be coming in, as Kyle mentioned earlier, maybe looking at one or two others coming in that area as well, you might find that they're stronger, or they're more consistent, or they're just better up and coming players that Falkirk has faith in because they're his players. So it'll be interesting to see if actually we do that fairly cheaply in that regard, in terms of, right back, there's already someone in the building, centre half, we're getting a guy on a free or a pretty cheap deal from Levski Sofia. That maybe potentially solves that area a little bit, and then you are looking at spending the money in right midfield, forward line, wingers. Let's get that's where the real money has to be spent. But it's, again, how much money will we actually have to spend, and a lot of that will depend on who goes out the door as well. We see Sam Lammers ripping it up in Holland for Utrecht. We see Cyril Dessers has scored enough goals, and his numbers have been good enough that a team might take a punt on him. You've got a few other areas, people like Hadji, people like Cantwell, people like Lawrence, who could potentially go out the door and make us some money. So you've got some areas there that you can boost the coffers a little bit to try and refresh. But whether all that happens and whether you want that much upheaval, I don't know the answer to that question. But yeah, so I think we're just approaching. I was waiting on you coming in there, Kyle, but that's fine. We're at the hour mark anyway. So.
I'm talking about that.
We're at the hour mark anyway, so there's been a huge number of people watching tonight. So thank you very much to you all. If you're not a subscriber to the channel, please do click that button. Plenty of Rangers content coming from TII for the remainder of this season, across the full summer, and then very much into next season as well. Drop a like on the video if you've enjoyed the content. My thank yous go to Kyle and Tommy for their contributions tonight, also to everyone for watching and for listening. And while it's not been a great weekend to be a Rangers fan, it's always good to remember that Rangers are the ones, and Rangers will get back to the top eventually. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening and watching. Until next time, goodbye.